Chapter 6. London Society. The violin bow ricocheted across the four strings. The resin gave way to the sound. The striking of the chords, the shrill scales played with ease. Pizzicato played with such skill that deemed inhuman. All from one man and one violin. No orchestra, no accompanist. This man, this creature, could fill an entire concert hall with the flick of the wrist. Felix and Fanny sat amongst the audience gathered in this recital hall. The hall was decently large. It was owned by an acquaintance, hence their invitation to this concert. Every seat had been filled, and it was worth every daring second. Felix stared in awe as the man with long locks of black hair conquered the wooden instrument in his hands. His long, thin structure helped his fingers stretch incomprehensibly far across the fingerboard. The violinist swayed aggressively with the bow's movements. At the end of the piece, he hammered the last chord, lifting the bow in the air. The concert's end. The panting musician moved to a relaxed position. This was Nicolo Paganini. The audience in attendance burst with applause. Felix and Fanny glanced at each other, exchanging their impressed expression. Nicolo bowed and walked away from the small stage. Everyone scattered about afterwards. Felix wanted to meet Nicolo, but the crowd was rendered too thick. He was lucky to have seen the virtuoso play up close. Back in Felix's musical aspirations, he would be making his leave abroad in a few weeks. In the midst of the busy month, a letter from Ignaz was received in response to his concerns on travel. Ignaz suggested that Felix begin his journey with London. Felix needed to start preparing. He turned to his father to inquire about the best way to get there. Abraham had some connection in Hamburg and got information on the ships that sailed to England. Felix wrote a response to Ignaz of the progress of his plans. Berlin, March 26, 1829. According to your advice, I have made inquiries about the boats between Hamburg and London. The first sails on the 4th of April, and after one every week. It will be impossible for me to leave by the 1st or the 2nd, as I have hitherto not been able to make any preparations. He goes on to write the success of Bach's oratorio in Berlin. Marx, the musicologist, helped further by having Felix's arrangement published for wider audiences. It was still March, and there was to be a second performance at the Academy. Berlin audiences requested for a third, but Felix knew it wouldn't be possible. He agreed to conduct a second, but Zelter would have to take over. He sighed and wrote, "The whole thing has interfered with the completion of my own compositions and other business that I shall require at least a fortnight to prepare for my departure. Then I want to stay a few days in Hamburg, so I shall leave only by the 3rd steamer on the 18th of April, due in London on the 20th. Paganini is in Berlin. He gives his last concert on Saturday, and then goes directly to London, where I believe he will meet with immense success. For his never-erring execution is beyond conception. You ask too much if you ask of a description of his playing. It would take up the whole letter, for he is so original, so unique, that it would require an exhaustive analysis to convey an impression of his style. Concerning London, can you really take rooms for me, as you suggested in your letter? Anything would be welcome, however small, if in your neighborhood. If so, please let Klingman know. He would have time to send the address to Berlin. Secondly, I want your advice on whether I should really bring the scores to some of my compositions. If so, what would be the best to select? I was thinking my overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you think that is suitable? And if I pack manuscripts in my portmanteau, shall I be able to pass the custom house without difficulty? In that case, I should bring several compositions and submit them to your judgment previous to making a selection. Please give my best regards to Mrs. Moscheles, and believe me, yours most sincerely, Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy." As the plans of travel were nearing with each day, Felix walked about the gardens and thought. The early spring brought a few flower buds. He picked a few blushing pink sprouts and arranged them into a miniature corsage. As he knew he'd be away from home for many months, he needed to be sure he gave his farewells to everyone he wanted. One person was on his mind at the moment. Felix exited the garden, carrying his little bundle of budding flowers. He then went down a few blocks from his home, stopping at a tall 3-story dark brick house. It was the home of the Pistor family. They were one of the neighbors. One of the singers of the academy was the Pistor daughter, Betty. She was good friends with Fanny and Rebecca. Felix met her many times with the Pistors' visits to the Sunday salons and the choir rehearsals at the academy. Both she and Felix were in a small singing group that sang on Fridays. Felix was the accompanist. They spoke at times, and he liked her company. He thought it important to see her before his leave. Felix knocked at the door. It was a few minutes before a maid answered. She let him into the entryway. As he entered, Mr. Pistor, Carl, rushed down the stairs. "Who is calling?" Upon seeing Felix, he brightened his demeanor. "Ah, Felix, what brings you here?" "I have to give some farewells, as I am to leave Berlin on a lengthy trip in a few days' time." "Oh, that is quite a surprise. I am happy for you. It is nice of you to stop here." He smiled. Mr. Pistor was a man of science. His main skill was constructing instruments for the use of scientific research. Much of what he learned he picked up from Felix's uncle, Nathan Mendelssohn. Mr. Pistor was also a lover of music. Like Abraham, he had a collection of Bach's manuscripts. Felix helped him organize them. "Is by chance Betty around?" Felix inquired. Mr. Pistor's expression changed. On a negative standpoint, Felix knew the question would cause such. It was obvious that Felix had admiration for his daughter. For Mr. Pistor, it would not be favorable in the eyes of his extended family. They had their own opinions of the Mendelssohns. Mr. Pistor himself had nothing against the youth's heart for his daughter, but if anything exceeded a mere friendship, it could ruin his family's view of his branch of the line. "Felix, Betty has gone out of the house to accompany some friends today. I am sorry, but she won't be back until later." Mr. Pistor sighed. Felix nodded. "All right, but at least bid her farewell for me." "You have my word," Mr. Pistor promised. Felix exited the house. Mr. Pistor watched him through the window as he ventured down the sidewalk. He gave a sigh of relief, then continued on some projects in his office upstairs. Felix walked a ways down the pavement. He paused a few minutes, then turned around. On coming back towards the house, he inspected the windows. No one was looking out. He then went to the small gate wedged between the Pistor home and the next. It was unlocked, so he discreetly opened it and went along the path between the houses. The little alley led to a good-sized flower garden behind the Pistor home. In his hopes, at the tree, sitting at the swing, book at hand, was beautiful Betty. Her long blonde locks were draped over her book. She read in all peacefulness until the swing was gently pulled back and pushed. Dropping her book from the unexpectedness, she snapped, "Brother, must you always disrupt my book?" She turned to see Felix. "Felix? Sorry, I thought you were my brother. Usually he interrupts my reading. Anyways, why didn't you just call at the door? I would have come." "I did. Your father told me you were in company of friends." "Oh, he's pulling that today. You shouldn't have snuck here, though. Father is in his office. The window is right there." She pointed to it. Felix shrugged. "I have no fear. It is important I found you, as I intended to give my farewells." "Farewells?" Betty sounded stunned. "I am going abroad in a few days. This is our last visit before I'm gone for many months." He sighed as he continued to push the swing. Betty stopped it and stood to face him. She gazed at him as to savor their visit. He then gave her the corsage of flower buds. She smiled, but then told him, "You must leave in haste, though. I cannot let my father catch you. He'll never let you back. You must know that our togetherness can only be but a mere friendship. You know how the other sides of my family are. Please don't give them an excuse to ruin our acquaintance." "I promise to return, and if it comes to anything, I promise to make things work out. I love you." He lightly pecked her cheek. She blushed. As he looked up from the light kiss, Mr. Pistor glared at him from the upstairs window. Betty didn't notice, so Felix wrapped up their conversation and left the garden in haste. In the following days, not a word nor note was heard from Mr. Pistor nor Betty. Instead, he received Ignaz's response to his previous letter. London, 1829. My dear friend, I have noted your questions and hope to answer them all to prepare you for the journey. I have secured rooms at said address, number 203, Portland Street, Oxford Street. Keep this letter in case you forget said address. I also wish you very much to bring some of your compositions. Please of all, I inquire you to bring your overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream. as well as that cantata of 16 parts. Horace says, "You shall not have any trouble getting through the customs house. Safe travels, and give your father greetings. Your sincere friend, Ignaz Moscheles." When the day had come of Felix's leave to London, he stood in his room, packing up his portmanteau. A few select outfits and manuscripts were sprawled about the bed. Klingman and Ignaz mentioned that in London, people dressed in good taste. He took his best outfits and the accessories to go with. His outfit of choice for the trip itself was well suited for the journey and showed a decent appearance. He wore a linen shirt with a navy blue wool waistcoat over it. His black coat was sturdy and had good form. It would give protection if the weather rendered cold or rainy. He grabbed a standard top hat to wear. It would help keep his head warm, with fashion. He would have to keep this outfit clean the best he could. It would get dirty after a few days' worth of travel, but he wanted to enter London in style. As Felix finished tying his black silk cravat, he glanced out the window. The coach to Hamburg was waiting outside the house. It gave him a surge of excitement. He finished packing and brought it all downstairs. His parents and siblings were gathered in the entryway to give their farewells. Wilhelm Hensel was visiting to say goodbye as well. Felix inquired to them all, "I should be home in the autumn in time for the anniversary. I will write." He alluded to his parents' 25th anniversary within the year. They wanted him to put together something special musically to entertain the guests. He would have plenty of time to compose during the long stretches of travel. Felix embraced his father tightly. His mother slathered him in kisses. Felix felt embarrassed as the siblings and Wilhelm giggled. "All right, Mom, please." Felix rubbed some of the kisses from his face. Leah teared up. "I won't see my child for months. You're growing up too fast." She dabbed her eyes with her handkerchief. After his siblings gave their hugs, Felix announced, "Auf Wiedersehen. I'll be back before you know it." He grabbed his bags and stepped outside with the utmost confidence. As he headed out the door, Fanny followed him. She stopped him outside. "I have a request as well for you to compose. It is possible I may need some music for a wedding that may take place in the autumn. I will write to you once I find out." "Is it Wilhelm?" "Yeah, dearest brother. I believe with my heart he is soon to ask. I felt you must be the first to hear of my belief. I shall prepare something." With that, Felix continued to the carriage. Once he settled, the horses trotted through the city. The coach happened to pass by the academy. Felix asked the coachman to stop a minute. The coachman allowed it, and Felix jumped out. He ran to the academy's doors. To his hopes, both Zelter and Rietz were there. He gave his well wishes for the upcoming performances of the Bach oratorio. In return, the two of them gave their heartfelt regards to the young traveler soon to embark. When Felix returned to the coach, it officially set off from Berlin to Hamburg. By mid-afternoon the next day, Felix arrived in Hamburg. The boat to London wasn't leaving until early tomorrow, so he found himself a room at an inn. Once he settled his belongings for the time being, he decided to go out for some lunch. The inn had a pub, but didn't serve anything hearty to satisfy his hungry state. The innkeeper suggested a restaurant down the street. As he went to find this restaurant, the streets were busy with passerby. Among the chatter and clopping of horse hoofs, he heard a melody playing from a violin, a Beethoven sonata. Felix turned about to find the busker, but no one had an instrument at hand. It sounded close by. He then looked at the building he stood near. It was a tall home on a street corner. A window was open, letting the music sing into the air. Staring up at the house, Felix froze from the reminiscences of déjà vu. The faint burning memory of his father pulling him out of bed in the dead of night, the rush of packing a carriage and leaving in haste to Berlin. He was only 3 upon the event. This house was the first home he ever knew. In the upstairs room of the Hamburg home, I practiced my violin, playing Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata. The air outside felt fresh as it breezed in through the window. I was then in my 19th year, visiting my family home. My own career already had much success. In the previous years, I had obtained a position in Berlin, living there. I did become more familiar with Felix Mendelssohn, but we met on subtle occasions. Our separate musical engagements crossed paths only a handful of times. While he was busy at the Sing Academy, I played among the first violins at the Konigstisches Theater. I heard much of the successful performances of Bach, but invitations for positions abroad distracted my focus. As I was soon to leave for Estonia, I decided to pay a visit to my Hamburg home. It felt nice to be with my parents, and they were happy to see me after I had lived in Berlin in the past few years. After playing through the first movement of the Strong Sonata, I took a break. I set my violin down and went to the window to look out. The usual horse carriages and citizens were tending to their business. Before I turned back, I looked down and saw a man staring up. He must have stumbled upon my playing. As I looked at him, I realized it was Felix. He didn't break his stare. A slight array of horror filled his eyes. I waved, and he shook himself out of his daze. He called from the street, "Excellent rendition." "Danke," I called back as he hurried off. The next day, upon boarding the boat to London, Felix's enthusiasm took an unexpected blow. 10 minutes of the boat floating on the water, not yet departing, he felt a rush of nausea come over him. He stood on the top deck, rocking with the boat in hopes to become accustomed to it. As the steamer took off, the rise and fall against the current made his stomach turn. He went from feeling slightly nauseous to horribly ill. It didn't fathom in his train of thought that he was prone to getting seasick. The sickness began to make him homesick as well. He wished his father to be with him. In his moment of regret, he took it out on the steward of the ship. "Turn the boat around. I can't take this anymore. I want to go home." Felix clung to the railing. The steward rolled his eyes. "We've left the dock already. It's 3 days to London. Get cozy." He patted his shoulder. Felix threw up over the side of the boat. "I'm dying." "You are not dying. You'll get your sea legs after a while." The steward helped him stand straight. As he tried to help him sway with the boat, a large wave caused the boat to dip unexpectedly. A feeling of dizziness hit Felix with such force, he fell flat on the deck, fainted. What a start to London. Felix woke in a small cabin of the ship. The bed was a hammock so it could sway with the boat. It didn't make things easier. Each wave that managed to lurch the boat lurched his stomach, making him hurl. It frustrated him horribly as his nice outfit suffered in the process. He tried to sleep, but the effort rendered useless. Instead, the sickening sea let him sleep by means of making him faint. On the 21st of the month, the boat thankfully docked in London by mid-morning. In the entire time at sea, Felix never gained his sea legs. Before leaving the boat, he managed to find a bucket of clean water and a rag. He cleaned off his coat the best he could, hoping to not look like a sick drunk walking the streets. The rocking of the boat would mess up his balance once he got back on land. After cleaning up a bit, in redetermination, he walked onto the docks, luggage at hand. A moment of bewilderment beseeched him when entering the London streets. He needed to find the custom house. There was a note he received of its address, but he needed something more specific. He grabbed a map he saved from his geography book. After studying it, he found the custom house was only a few streets away. He looked up from the map. There was another problem. A thick fog sulked through every road and alley of the city. It was impossible to see from one side of the street to the other. Felix hoped it would clear soon. The streets began to look similar in the smoky air. Felix resorted to his map rather than surroundings. After turning a few corners, closely following it, he found himself standing in the middle of an alley. He huffed in frustration. His huff turned to shock as he noticed the state of the neighborhood. The streets were muddy and the horse manure reeked. The alley led to a dust yard. A few workers in their tattered clothes sorted through baskets of old rags and garbage. Among the ones working were children, quite young. Felix had not seen such dirty living conditions. Berlin had certain neighborhoods that weren't the best, but the dark side of London fared far worse for the poor of the city. There were 2 stocky grown men taking a break from their work. Their faces expressed tiredness and irritation. They eyed the young man in well-kept attire, lost in his way. Felix felt their stares and kindling thoughts. He forced himself to turn around. He didn't want to get tangled up in a brawl. Back on the main streets, he became more confused in the fog. Many people ran into him as he toiled in the walkway. One finely dressed English gentleman bumped into him and hissed, "Watch where the bloody hell you're going." Felix opened his mouth to apologize, but the man continued on. A voice then called in Felix's direction, "Oi, you, young lad." Felix turned to see a man nearby leaning against the chase. He continued to say, "I know you're lost. You've been walking the same street for the past 20 minutes. You could have stopped the cab. I wouldn't be lost if only this fog would clear up. You mean the smog. It never clears. Smog? Felix glanced at the sky. The man laughed. I notice you're a foreigner. First time abroad? I've traveled in my childhood. It's my first time in London, though. Say, you must be a cab. That I am. Where is it you need to be? He asked. I must find the custom house. Felix gave him the address. The coachman nodded, and they climbed in the chaise. He took him straight to the right place. The coachman assured, This building is the custom house. Oh, danke, Felix said in excitement. The coachman gave him a confused glance. Felix corrected, Thanks. After Felix paid the coachman, he grabbed his luggage and headed inside. He gave a sigh of relief as he set his things down on the bench. There were many people waiting to have their papers checked, so Felix grabbed a book to read in the meantime. As soon as opening the book, a familiar voice chanted in jubilation, You have made it! Karl! Felix looked up instantly to see Klingman racing towards him. They shook hands in greeting, having not seen one another in a few weeks. Klingman asked as he noticed his friend's weary state, How was the trip? You look a bit of a mess. It was an experience, he answered. Klingman assured, Well, you are lucky that I work around here. I'll get you checked in. Klingman gestured to Felix to follow. They went to one of the offices, and Klingman sorted through Felix's legal papers. Felix then asked, What about the rooms Ignaz said he found for me? About that. The rooms are still currently being occupied, but that's no matter. You can stay with me. I have extra space that is suitable for a few days. Your official place of stay will be open on the 25th. He stamped a few papers, then put them back in Felix's folder. Let's get you to my place. I imagine you're hungry and tired. Yeah, I could fall asleep right now. Felix grabbed his things and followed Klingman out of the custom house. Klingman stopped a carriage, and they rode it a ways into the city. It stopped at a tall complex. Klingman guided him in and helped Felix get his luggage up the stairs. When they got to the 3rd floor, they walked down a hall until Klingman stopped at a door. He unlocked it. It is a bit small, but it's a humble abode. I have a guest room, but it's very small. It would be good for a few days, but you'll get claustrophobic after a few nights. He showed him in. The flat was decent. The guest room was a single bed, taking up a closet-like space. Klingman told him, I'm sorry, but I do have work to tend to back at the custom house. I'll let you rest here, and I must mention, the Mocellas' home is only a few blocks down. After you rest up, you'll want to call on them. I have an extra key for this flat. He handed it to Felix. Danke. Felix went to the guest room and slid his luggage under the bed. As soon as Klingman left for business, Felix flopped onto the bed. As soon as his face hit the pillow, he slept hard. The traveling thus far had worn him out completely. Felix woke up after a long 3-hour nap. The 14th hour had struck. He was still relaxed in bed, catching a few more snoozes. Once he felt rested enough, he went to his luggage and gathered some music. He then fixed his outfit up a bit and walked a few buildings down to Ignaz's home. He had the address and found it much more conveniently. Upon entering the complex, he went up some stairs. He did not know the specific flat where Ignaz lived. As he roamed the 2nd floor, he heard the faint sound of a piano. It was Ignaz's playing. He followed it to the right door. After knocking, a kindly-faced woman answered. She smiled. Oh, you've come. My husband is practicing at the moment, but do come in. The woman was Charlotte Mocellas. She had not the chance to meet Felix until now, but heard much of him over the years. She knew him by Ignaz's words and description. She showed him in. You must have had such a hard trip. You look so tired. I have rested some from the harsh journey. I've learned that the sea doesn't agree with me. Oh, you poor thing. I know how that can get. The first time my husband came home from a tour, he was ill for a week. He gathered his sea legs over the years, though. Charlotte went to the dining table where a tray of tea sat. She grabbed 2 of the cups with the saucers. Tea came at the hour. It's fresh. She handed Felix a cuppa. She then led him to the room next door where the music played. When they entered, Ignaz looked up from the piano and jumped with excitement. Felix nearly threw his tea in the air. Charlotte took it from him as Ignaz greeted Felix. Felix asked after the handshakes, May I know what piece you were just playing? It's a fantasia for piano and orchestra, something I'm dedicating to the writer Sir Walter Scott. I have a concert on the 7th of next month. Did you bring your Shakespeare overture? Of course. Felix grabbed the score from his folder. Ignaz looked at it as a precious piece of art. There is to be another concert at the end of May and one in June. I'd like to see this performed in June. It's a charity concert to raise money to help victims of those dreadful floods happening in Silesia. Sir George Smart is organizing it. He suggested Beethoven's 5th piano concerto as well. I told him that you could do it. For the concert in May, could you possibly conduct your symphony in C? My music, played in London? Felix questioned. Ignaz nodded. They both became filled with enthrallment. Charlotte butted in their enthusiasm. Felix, before you have your music performed in London, you first need to learn the ways of the city and society. I do not want you to embarrass yourself upon gatherings. Things are a bit different here than in Berlin. I know you'll teach me well. Felix smiled on the fact that he'd be learning how to be a proper Londoner. Charlotte went back to the other room to get more tea. Ignaz suggested, "Today we can call upon some of my acquaintances to introduce you to for a start." He then called to Charlotte. "Darling, was it Mr. Chappell who wrote, inviting us to a late tea this afternoon?" "Yes, he also invited Mr. Kramer, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Collard," she answered. Ignaz told Felix, "You probably know the proper ways of tea, as your mother hosts gatherings as such. The one I went to seemed quite casual, but I imagine she's hosted formal ones." "Yeah, sometimes on special occasions. There are sandwiches and pastries to go along with the tea." "Ah, so you should know the proper way of eating," Ignaz stated. Felix nodded, but in slight confusion as to what he meant. He thought it was no big deal, as he knew table manners. Tea at his home had its formalities. His mother got inspiration from British tea. At around 3 o'clock, they took a carriage to a quaint town house. It was a large, well-kept structure made up of a few homes. Mr. Chappell lived in one of the center houses. When they called at the home, they were shown in and led to the dining table where Mr. Kramer, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Collard sat. Another lady sat next to Mr. Taylor. Mr. Chappell took his seat at the far end. It was different than Felix had expected. Straight away he could tell the manners were far more intricate. He wished Ignaz hadn't assumed that formal tea at his home was exactly British tea. In this situation, he felt nervous to even grab a chair, as everyone seemed to sit in a certain order. He waited and took the last open spot between Charlotte and Mr. Taylor. Felix greeted Mr. Taylor and began conversation with him. His first name was John. He worked in Wales as a mining engineer. Sitting next to him was his sister, Mrs. Austen. Charlotte addressed her. "It is such an unexpected pleasure to see you, Mrs. Austen. How was your visit to Bonn?" "Very well. I came back only a day hence. It feels good to return to England." She looked curiously at Felix. Charlotte introduced him. "This is Mr. Mendelssohn. He's from Berlin." "A Mendelssohn? I met one while in Bonn. He was a professor at the university there." "That would be my cousin," Felix said in surprise. Mrs. Austen smiled and looked to Mr. Taylor. John suggested to Felix, "You should come meet my family. I have 3 daughters who would be thrilled to meet you. 2 of my sons still live with me, as the others are in Wales tending to work while I'm not there." "I'd love to," Felix accepted. Mrs. Austen assured, "We should all take a walk through the park tomorrow. The weather has been faring well this week." After everyone agreed on the idea, a maid brought the tea and began pouring it into the elegant cups. The set was fine china, with beautiful purple lilacs painted on the white porcelain. The tea tray had been set full of scones, sandwiches, and cakes. Felix was famished, as he hadn't eaten all day. He waited, though, to see what was next. Once the tea was served, they began picking up their cups and taking small sips. Felix carefully held his cup along with the saucer underneath in case he spilled. It felt logical. Mr. Chappell gave a disturbed glance. Felix set it down, knowing he'd done something improper already. He didn't know what it was exactly, as no one spoke of it. The conversation continued. Mr. Chappell asked Felix, "How long have you studied the English language? You speak quite well." "Since my youth I've studied a handful of useful and educational speeches," he answered. Mr. Chappell then encouraged, "You look hungry. Please, have some food. I see you eyeing it." No one had taken any of the food yet, so Felix hesitantly reached for a sweet raspberry scone. Everyone seemed to disapprove. Felix began to wonder if he should have taken the plain one instead. He tried to ignore the stares by grabbing the cream. It only made it worse as he poured a dab in the peppermint tea. As he stirred it, the spoon clanked against the cup. He stirred slower as Mr. Chapel cleared his throat. Charlotte spoke up. "Mr. Chapel, if you don't mind, I wish to excuse myself and Felix for a moment." She stood from the table. Felix followed her out of the room. Once they got out, Charlotte asked him in concern, yet with care. "I know you told Ignaz that your mother hosted tea, but have you ever had formal tea outside of home?" "No, please excuse me, but I do not know why they keep staring." "Here, let's take a moment and talk a bit about tea etiquette." She went to a small table in a neighboring room. There happened to be a decorative teacup and saucer on it. She sat down. Felix pulled up a chair. She began. "There are a lot of rules for proper manners. It's more than just knowing not to slurp the tea." She grabbed the teacup and saucer. She set it in front of Felix. "Pick it up as if you were going to take a sip." Felix grabbed the handle of the cup, which he did now correctly from watching everyone earlier, but he picked up the saucer. Charlotte made him set it back down. "The saucer always stays at the table. Remember not to blow on the tea, even if it's too hot." Felix listened, but rather didn't understand these picky rules. Charlotte handed him a teaspoon. "Show me how you stir." Felix stirred it as he would, but Charlotte corrected. "Stir it up and down, not in circles, or it will make too much noise." The first kind of tea served was peppermint. Milk and sugar are only for black tea. Now with the food. The tea sandwiches are eaten first, then the scones and desserts. Be sure to break the scone apart, but do not dunk a scone into tea. All of the food should be eaten with your fingers. Felix nodded. Charlotte added, "And put the napkin on the left side when it is over." They then stood from the table and re-entered the room. Everyone greeted them back. Mr. Chapel asked in speculation, "Did Charlotte teach you some things? You were absent for a bit." "I believe so." Felix grabbed a tea sandwich. His scone was still on the plate, but he left it to eat later. Mr. Chapel smiled. "Very well. There's some fresh Earl Grey tea, as the other grew cold from your leaving." "Thank you." Felix put some milk and sugar in it and stirred it properly. When tea finished, after more conversation, everyone set their napkins down properly and got up. Felix felt more confident as he learned better tea manners. On the ride back to Ignaz's home, Ignaz suggested to Felix, "I think it may be best if Charlotte teaches you the details of London society. You do have good manners, but you need some help. The social aspects here are different from what you are accustomed to." Charlotte mentioned, "You seem to learn quickly, so I think you'll be fine. Since tomorrow we are going to spend time in the park, you want to get a proper hat and jacket." "Proper hat?" "I do have one, but didn't wear it since it's not cold out." Felix noticed many gentlemen walking outside with fine top hats, though there wasn't a chill. Ignaz had a rather nice hat as well. Charlotte and many ladies around wore a bonnet. She explained, "A fine gentleman in public wears a nice hat as an accessory, plus you don't want too much sun." "All right. I do have some extra money from the concerts I conducted before I came, so I should be able to get a decent one. A new suit will help you blend in with the city. The hat and jacket you'll have are fashioned after styles in Berlin. I can take you to a good tailor tomorrow morning," she offered. Felix felt a slight burden of having to buy a new outfit. Ignaz added, "I do believe Herr Klingmann shall be joining us tomorrow as well." Mr. Chapel wanted to invite him. "Oh, good," Felix chimed. The carriage then stopped by Klingmann's home. Felix disembarked and told Charlotte, "See you tomorrow. I'll catch you at your door at 10. With that, he went back to the flat. Felix gave a sigh of relief upon returning to the little guest room. It enclosed him, giving him a much-needed break from this new outside world. He gathered some of his manuscripts and looked through them while sitting in bed. He brought a makeshift keyboard to practice on without upsetting any neighbors. He was glad, though, that Ignaz had a real piano. After writing and organizing some things, the hour got late, so he cleaned up everything and retired for the night. The next day, Felix was in a carriage with Charlotte on their way to the tailor. They rode through a beautiful neighborhood of large houses. Neatly paved brick streets and a miniature flower gardens embellished the street sides and yards. It was quite a sight to see. The smog wasn't as dense as they were far from the factories that produced smoke. At the end of the road, shops and restaurants lined the streets. They appeared fancy and expensive. Though it all looked high-priced, Felix assumed the tailor would be reasonable, as Charlotte was a reasonable woman. She wanted the best for Felix, appearance-wise and cost-wise. Over the course of only a day, he had begun to look up to her as his mother. When they arrived at the tailor shop, they found the tailor himself at work. Straightway, the bright-eyed craftsman greeted Charlotte. She was well acquainted with him. He couldn't have been more than 5 years older than Felix. "Who is it you have brought?" The tailor noticed Felix standing a pace or so behind Charlotte. "This is Felix. He needs a new outfit." Charlotte nudged Felix forward. The tailor held out his hand. "My name is Zachary. Where are you from?" "Berlin." Felix shook his hand. Zachary examined his current outfit. "I imagine you want something a bit more British." "I think so." Felix felt an offense as Zachary looked at the label of his coat in disgust. He assured, "I'll find you something that will suit you. Come with me." He walked towards the door. As Felix followed Zachary, Charlotte went to look at the women's accessories. Felix looked around in awe as they entered a room stocked of every sort of garment, from fine linen to shoes. There were many choices. Zach shuffled through some linen shirts and silk waistcoats. "You'll want more than one coat and a few different waistcoats, depending on the occasion." He grabbed waistcoats of various colors. The standard coats that went over them were either black or dark gray. The pants tended to match the coats. There were many options on the style of coat, such as morning, dress, and frock. Some had elegant, pleated shoulders, while others looked broad and slim. The various lengths changed the look as well. Felix skimmed some racks and happened upon something unique, a deep blue dress coat with a refined shape. He couldn't help but take it from the rack. Nearby, he found a pair of long white pants. Zachary noticed him piecing a suit together, so he handed him a brown silk waistcoat. "This will go well with that." After finding a linen undershirt and shoes, Felix eagerly headed for the fitting room. Zachary stopped him. "There's something you need yet to get the correct silhouette." He skimmed some shelves. Felix had noticed many gentlemen with a silhouette of broader shoulders and a slimmed waist. He figured it was the style of coat, until Zachary unexpectedly handed him a corset. He took it in confusion and told him dumbfoundedly, "I am not wearing a corset. I assure you this is styled for a gentleman. It has become a standard undergarment among the refined. Charlotte mentioned that you are to make a public appearance in concert halls and London society. Your figure must be favorable." He nudged Felix to the fitting room. Felix thought it rather ridiculous. After the corset had been tightened, he felt stiff and constricted, whilst fitting the other layers of the outfit over it. After buttoning up his coat, he asked Zachary with a worrisome tone, "Are you sure it's not too tight? Feels like it's crushing my ribs." "It's only crushing a few of the lower ones," he bluntly stated, as if it were a normal fact. Felix paused in unsettlement by his words. He wasn't joking. When he turned about near the mirror, the suit looked sharp, but the sleeves and pant legs were too long. Zachary grabbed some sewing tape to calculate the correct measurements. It took a while, as Felix chose 3 other outfits. After the painstaking process of patiently getting measured, Zachary finally said, "These outfits will work. I'll get them hemmed. It will take an hour or so. How about you go look at the hats and cravats in the meantime?" Felix changed back into his regular outfit. After feeling that he could breathe again, he went to the front room to find Charlotte. She looked at the accessories with him. He tried on some top hats, as Charlotte gave insight. Some hats were far too tall in his preference. The smaller ones were styled for a lady's riding outfit. He then found a few standard gentlemanly hats that favored him. After finding a nice sturdy black wool top hat and some cravats, Felix and Charlotte waited for the suits. Once they were ready, Felix tried them on once more to be sure they fit. Though he hated the feeling of restraint, his favorite outfit was the one with the blue coat. The hat and a black cravat completed it to the full. He felt like a proper Londoner from then. He chose that outfit to wear out. Felix then paid at the front desk. The price wasn't as fun as choosing the outfits. Charlotte handed him some money to help. After it was paid for, they took a carriage, heading back to Klingman's house, so Felix could put the other outfits with his luggage. After that, everyone met at the park for the afternoon walk. The weather was well suited with the sun out. The smog wasn't as bad as yesterday. Kramer, Chappell, Ignaz, Klingman, and an unfamiliar man were already at the park. Felix and Charlotte caught up to them. The new person was a friend of Klingman. Mr. Rosen was his name. He was a professor of Sanskrit at the University of London and worked in the Hanover embassy with Klingman. Mr. Rosen was quite intrigued upon meeting Felix. The Berliner's attitude and attire made him appear as one of the most proper gentlemen walking about. Felix was busy talking to Karl, not noticing the passerby giving glances. Soon Mrs. Austen joined the walk with Mrs. Taylor and the Taylor daughters. John and his sons had to be elsewhere. The eldest daughter was named Anne. She was nearest to Felix's age, and right away appeared struck with awe at his appearance. The youngest was Honora. She was very playful and imaginative. Susan was the middle sister. Felix deemed her the prettiest. As their group walked on, Mr. Rosen trailed to the back where Felix was speaking with Klingman. He joined their conversation. They were speaking of common things. Felix told Karl of his experience at tea with his improper manners. Karl laughed. "Oh, you'll learn after a while. It is quite picky, but it's all relaxing." "I hope I get these English manners down," Felix said. Mr. Rosen butted in. "I bet in a few days you'll be the politest young man in Britain." "I don't know if I'd go that far," Felix chuckled. Rosen went on to say, "I fancy that I'd like the two of you at my house for dinner. I am able to have guests on the 25th. "I'll be moving to my official place of stay that day," Felix said. "Where are you staying?" "You could come over after moving in. It's on Portland Street." "Please," I inquire. "I'm only a street away from there." "All right, I can make time," Felix bartered. Karl added, "I will be there as well. You have wonderful food." The group continued walking and talking of other common things. After they walked the entire park, they dispersed back to their homes. The next 2 days Felix kept company at Ignaz's home. They shared music and improvised at the piano together. When they improvised, it was almost like a game as they tried to trick each other with unexpected melodies. They changed keys on the spot and added more voicings as they carried on. Before Felix left, after many hours of practice and fun, he offered to help Ignaz copy the orchestra parts for the upcoming concert. The work would take some time, but he wanted to help his friend. Ignaz was glad to have anything done to lighten his load. When the 25th came, Felix gathered his belongings and headed to his new abode. The place was roomy and included many furnishings. It was a large room containing the living area in one half and a kitchenette with a dining table in the other. Another room contained the bedroom. It was mid-afternoon when he finished getting settled. He wanted to work on things for Ignaz, but Mr. Rosen sent a note reminding him of his dinner proposal. Felix wished he could have cancelled, but he knew Rosen wouldn't forgive him. He was looking rather overly forward to his coming. When the hour came, Felix found Rosen's home with the given address. He entered with Klingman, who happened to arrive at the same time. The dinner looked very well made. Mr. Rosen greeted them. "Pleasant for you to come. I've got roasted Peking duck." He guided them to their seats. His wife and children were at the table as well. They spoke upon many subjects while eating. Felix was rather in distraction, though, penning a letter to Ignaz. He hoped to have time to make the copies of music. "Felix," Mr. Rosen questioned, "did you not hear what I asked?" Felix looked up in bewilderment. Klingman elbowed him, whispering, "Don't write during dinner." "I'm sorry. What is it you have asked?" "I want you to improvise something on the piano there. I'd so much like to hear it. I've heard much of your skill at improvising." He pointed to the upright piano against the wall. Felix got up from his dinner and went to the old instrument. He began on a melody of a sonata, then blended the notes to some common English tunes he had heard while riding through London. Everyone enjoyed it, as they recalled the folk tunes. Felix didn't necessarily know them, but they weren't too complicated to incorporate. After playing some more and finishing dinner, Mrs. Rosen and the children headed to the parlor for the evening. Felix stood to make his leave, but Mr. Rosen questioned Felix. "Where are you going?" "Back to my flat," he answered. Mr. Rosen inquired, "You must not know. It is custom that after dinner the men stay for a smoke and visit more so." "Oh." Felix sat back down. Klingman straight up lit a cigar, as did Mr. Rosen. Karl handed Felix one and lit one for him. It was a common thing for men to smoke, but he had not become accustomed to it. He tried it and instantly thought he'd hack up a lung. Mr. Rosen chuckled. Klingman suggested, "Just keep breathing. You'll get used to it." Felix took his advice, but after many minutes of coughing, he gave it up. After much conversing, the evening came to a close. Felix and Klingman retired from Mr. Rosen's home. When Felix got back to his official home in London, he did not go to bed. Instead, he kept the candles lit and began working on Ignaz's project. The concert was in a few weeks, so he needed to be sure to have it done. Many things progressed as the concert got closer. Felix had found his time to make the orchestra copies. Ignaz was so happy to see it done. The rehearsals for the concerts were going smoothly. With each day, Felix's English manners improved, with the help of Charlotte. Together they attended other local theatrical events, such as the plays of Shakespeare. He made many new acquaintances and received many invitations to social gatherings. His talents not only at the piano impressed the Londoners, but it was his way of speech as he spoke with elegance. He could read the works of classical literature in their original language, intriguing any scholar. His ability to draw and paint the scenes of the land were above that of an amateur. Along with those things, his taste in attire rendered him as one of the most fashionable gentlemen. Many new to meeting the young man thought him to be a fellow Englishman, until his accent gave him away as a foreigner. At times Charlotte helped him when his manners weren't up to par. Occasionally he made a drastic mistake at tea or dinner, but his apologies were far too sincere for anyone not to put into account. After Ignaz's concert successfully came and went, the next planned concert came up. It was in the latter part of May. Felix conducted some of his own works, such as his first symphony and an orchestral version of the Concerto from his string octet. He played Weber's Concertstück at the piano. The music was a hit in London. Yet it wasn't until the benefit concert in June that would establish Felix in London society. There he planned to conduct the overture for A Midsummer Night's Dream. Sir George Smart was the man organizing the concert to be hosted at the Agrilla Rooms in London. The rehearsals went well, but many curious people attended the sessions to listen, sometimes crowding about amongst the orchestra, mostly ladies curious about Felix. They didn't bother the musicians, so Felix just went with it. When the day of the official concert came, Felix arrived early to the concert house. He went through the lobby, but found the auditorium locked. No one was around, so he wandered the open halls. There was a small room containing an upright piano, so he decided to improvise in the meantime. Back in the lobby, someone unlocked the auditorium as the orchestra arrived. They got set up, but wondered where Felix was. Much of the audience flooded in early, mostly ladies. Many heard a piano faintly coming from a distant room, but didn't think much of it. One of the violinists searching for their conductor heard an improvised version of the Beethoven Concerto. He found Felix in a rush. "The concert is to start soon. What are you doing?" "Oh," Felix got up and ran. Yet he turned the opposite way. The violinist called out, "Where are you going?" "I must get dressed." Felix rushed to a room to change into his favorite outfit. It was the one with the blue coat and white pants. After changing, he dashed about backstage, but halted himself to walk casually on to stage. A full crowd was already assembled, and the orchestra was set. He began the concert without any waiting. After the London audience heard the overture to their beloved play of Shakespeare, they were enthralled to the full. Felix then played at the piano with the orchestra Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto. To the audience's surprise, he played it from memory. Felix preferred having sheet music, as it was a formality, but his rendition in the moment favored to his satisfaction. Felix became the talk of the town after that concert. The success of it led to other musical engagements and gatherings. It all attracted the attention of journalists and music critics. They asked many questions later to write in their reviews in the papers. One of the last questions each of them asked was, "What would you like to go by in the papers?" In which Felix answered confidently without any hesitation, "Felix Mendelssohn."